I'm Jared, your host, and you're listening to episode number 3 of the Finding Ananda podcast. Hey everyone, welcome to episode number 3 of the Finding Ananda podcast, where we discuss finding happiness through self-discovery with the hope of becoming the most authentic expression of oneself. Today I sat down with my new friend, Mishika, who I met online a day or two ago. I found Mishika's YouTube channel while looking up New Age to Christianity conversion stories or testimonials. This topic has interested me for a while now, and I think it's just because I'm generally interested in how people find their path in life. So after watching Mishika's video, I really enjoyed her comments, ideas, and thoughts surrounding this topic. So I asked, and she agreed to come on the podcast. So in today's episode, we discuss what exactly is New Age spirituality, how Mishika and myself discovered the New Age, experiencing God, world religions, and the Western mindset surrounding spirituality. So I hope you enjoy this episode, and without any further ado, let's check in with Mishika. I guess to begin, I want to ask you, how would you define New Age spirituality? It's pretty like an eclectic term, pretty broad, and I think it's if you've been in it, you kind of can recognize like what it is. But for someone just generally, how would you personally define like New Age spirituality?
So New Age spirituality would probably just be a way to explain how people are tapping into their spirit through maybe more unconventional means or means that have been less popularized throughout the years. So rather than going to a priest through Catholicism or Christianity to connect with a god, or rather than going through a certain system, you may use different aspects of different spiritual practices or ancient traditions, whether that's connecting through ancestors, whether that's through the use of rituals. So it is more expansive in terms of how people are connecting to God. But that's the whole point of the New Age spirituality is to connect through God through your own means, I would say.
Yeah, I agree with that. Before we started the call, I went on Wikipedia, which isn't the greatest source, but I looked up New Age, and you can let me know what you think about this definition. It says, New Age is a term applied to a range of spiritual and religious beliefs and practices that grew rapidly in the Western world in the 1970s. Precise scholarly definitions of the New Age differ in their emphasis, largely as a result of the highly eclectic culture or structure. Although analytically often considered to be religious, those involved in it typically prefer the designation of spiritual or mind, body, spirit, and rarely use the term New Age themselves. What are your thoughts on that? I thought was the thing that stuck out to me in that paragraph was it's difficult to pin down based off its highly eclectic structure.
So interesting. I will speak on that. The first thing that popped into my head was that they said that it basically emerged throughout the 70s and that it uses sort of religious doctrines or whatnot from a number of places. But I think that it's a little misleading to talk about spirituality in that way. I think New Age spirituality is more so about allowing yourself to learn different traditions from different places. But to say that like those techniques to connect to God are new is counterintuitive because they're actually not new. They're very ancient. So they are very real, very old traditions that already existed that now are available to people through the internet and through being able to connect freely and talk about these things. It's allowed people to kind of be able to learn what works for them, and some people kind of delve into different traditions and I guess, utilize what they can or what they want to use. And some people will pick one thing and then say, this is kind of like my main belief system, and then still be able to pull from other, not doctrines, but knowledge from other traditions. And then the last thing you said about the eclectic, what was that?
Eclectic structure.
Eclectic structure.
Mm-hmm.
What about that kind of made you look at it again?
It was because essentially they're saying that it was hard for scholars to like define it or kind of pin it down because it's
Right.
so diverse. Like someone can say that I am what well actually he said that they don't identify as like new agers, so to speak, but you can go to like, I don't know, a more Western yoga class and they have like incense burning. They usually have some like crystals going, and then you can go to some other place that's like you said, like a ancient tradition, like a Hindu temple, and then kind of
Mm-hmm.
have like the same incense, probably not crystals, but it's someone on the outside would say, okay, they're chanting, they're meditating, they have similar gods and goddesses around, so they're the same, but they're not.
Yeah, and that's the thing that's difficult to understand about it, because you see the similarities in the stories, and you see the similar totems or the similar symbols, and the thing about New Age spirituality is that it's not a religion, so it's not going to be this very set thing, and it's not going to be clear cut, because people are essentially like sharing, and there are these themes that go together and that coincide with each other, and I think that some people are not comfortable with the whole sharing aspect of it, because it's like different cultures have certain um, different cultures describe things in a certain way, and I think that's useful if you're coming from a certain place and you want to connect to your family, or you want to connect. Let's say you're like Native American or something, and you live in America, and you're not that connected to your spirit side. That's going to be useful for you to connect to Native American heritage and bring that knowledge, that ancient knowledge, into your everyday life. And I think that those are my thoughts on that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think like, I don't know, when I we'll get into this further later on, I think, but you're talking about how they use similar symbols and some people are not comfortable with the idea of sharing or getting knowledge from other traditions. Do you think that kind of stems from the more Western mindset of like having a exclusive revelation in your have a like the book, as opposed to more Eastern mindsets of like, the bee will get honey from all the flowers, whatever, like it'll take what it needs, right?
Yeah.
Is that how you kind of feel about that?
Yeah. So I think that because we're here on Earth in this dimension, it's very like we our egos are very connected to us. So we kind of like are very separate. And when you are looking into these higher perspectives, things become more like symbols. They become more like archetypes. They become more like figures of consciousness that you can use to help understand the deeper aspects of yourself. Because between you and I, we as humans, we kind of see ourselves as separate a lot of the time, but the deeper that you go into perspective, the more is allowed within that one perspective. Um, and so then it is you are able to share because it's like you're sharing the same thing.
Right.
So like in Taoist philosophy, you have like I think it's called the Wu Wei, which is basically the idea of non-action or like effortless action, and it talks a lot about following or being a part of the flow. And then if you go to like a Native American tribe, they'll talk about how they believe in being in one with nature. And then if we talk about Ubuntu philosophy, that exists in Africa still, but was very prevalent beforehand, before colonialism and stuff. The Ubuntu philosophy was all about how everything is a part of life force and how life force is essentially um, encompasses everything. And then you go back to Taoism, then you go back to Hinduism, you go back to these other places, and you're like, oh, all of these different religions are talking about the same thing. And so then it's not it's up to you to choose what you want to learn from in terms of that archetype or in terms of whatever symbol you're working with, because it is all kind of they're all similar in terms of how they're interacting with each other.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, you have to kind of like feel or know what speaks to you on a more heart level, I guess. What
Yeah,
specific archetype or symbol really speaks to you for like your personal devotion.
yeah, I agree.
Um, so the main reason I want to ask you for this podcast was because I watched your video on New Age to Christianity. And honestly, when I clicked on it, I was like, oh, so it'll be another one of the ones I've been watching for, and not like in a bad way. Like I've been like really interested in this idea of conversion from, or if you can call it conversion, New Age to Christianity.
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to like, I don't know, just gather information. So I saw your video, like, oh, this is someone who kind of thinks like me, or my perception of it was similar. So I would love to like ask her some questions about like her experience with this. So how how did you get into New Age spirituality, or were you ever into it at all, or just kind of like how did that come on like your radar?
Oh, this is a story. Okay. I tend to ramble, so I'm going to really try to like segment this so that you're not just like sitting, not talking for half an hour.
No worries.
Um, but in the video, I talk a little bit about how, okay, let me start from the beginning. When I was young, I went to church with my family on Christmas and Easter, pretty much. And we grew up with like certain religious philosophies, Ten Commandments, and like um, don't do to others what you wouldn't do to yourself, things like that. So in that sense, my parents were a good um, they were good role models in terms of like helping me understand certain morals, I guess. They raised me to be pretty like polite and yeah. So in that sense, I think that I came from like a good natured place in some ways. And then we went to church, and I always felt like I didn't understand. So there was something about being in church that was like very confusing to me about God. And so I was very, very curious about God. And I was like, where did the Big Bang come from? I don't understand. What happened before that? Like, so there was this one day where I was asking my family like so many questions about the whole nature of reality, essentially. And I remember leaving that like conversation and not having any of the answers really met the way that I needed for them to be met in order for me to understand. And I would pray sometimes, but I wouldn't really ask for, well, maybe I did ask for things. I'm sure there are very immature things. But there was one time where I was like around 11 or 12, and I was sitting in bed, and I, no, I was laying in bed. I was trying to sleep. I hadn't slept for hours, and I was just laying in bed breathing. And um, at some point, I didn't know if I was like dreaming or not dreaming because it'd been so long and I just wasn't moving. And prior to this night, I'd had like these flashes that would come in like a circle, and it was, I want to say, bluish. Um, and and this is when I had my eyes closed, and it was actually like annoying, and I didn't know what it was, and I kept trying to like look away from it for as long as it was happening prior to this night. And then it happened again on this night. And then I was like, whatever, like I can't avoid looking at this thing that like keeps coming into my vision. And so I decided to like stare at it. And I stared at it for a really long time. And I guess I just wasn't thinking of anything, and I just was thoughtless at this point. But after a certain amount of time of staring at this light that was coming in through my vision when my eyes were closed, I started to see a tunnel, and the light became a tunnel essentially. And as the tunnel became stronger, it's like the circle was coming from behind my head forward. And then my heart was my heartbeat was really rapid, and there was like a lot of vibrating. And at some point, I went through said tunnel that was in my mind. And I ended up in this place that I didn't understand. And it was the most profound experience I've ever had in my life. I've ever had in my life. And it made me feel like I was in a state of pure bliss, and I completely let go. I didn't have an ego. I didn't remember who I was. In that time, while I was in that space, I understood everything about the world, everything about the universe, like any knowledge or questions that I'd had were answered through this experience. Um, and there was also this sense of communication between me and I knew this was God, by the way. Um, this was the most profound thing that I couldn't even comprehend before I was in that realm. So, and also the colors were like extremely bright, extremely vivid. I remember thinking I saw colors that I didn't even see like in my own waking life, um, like they didn't exist. Um, and, I also just, it was just pure love. It was love that was on a level that was not possible normally. And yeah, so as I experienced this, I started remembering myself or my ego. And that's like what took me out of the experience. And it's like from there, I kind of like came back down into my body. And by the way, that sense of being, that place that I was at, which was within myself, um, it actually really felt like home. And it felt like it was so familiar, and it felt like I knew it. Like I was like, oh yeah, I'm back. Like, so it was um it's funny because it's for so long I was asking what God was. I before this experience I thought God was like, just like this person with a beard who had like loose robes. And it's so beyond that. And um yeah, so I came back from that experience, and I realized, oh, this is kind of like just this is the life I'm living now. This is like the game for this life, and you do what you need to do, and I'll go back. Um, but what I will say about all of this is that from that point, I didn't, all I took from it really at that age was like love, everything is love, and that there was a God, and that, some of the things that I've explained now, but now I have a lot of knowledge about what that experience was because I've looked at other traditions. I've looked at Christianity as well. I've looked at Catholicism. There are pieces of this, let's just call it source energy or force, that you can find through many different ancient texts, and it all connects to the same thing. But it's just different in how, based off of where you're from, what religion is, dominating that area or whatever, which influences how that is described. And yeah, so.
So after this experience, were you trying to make sense of it, and then you're trying to, or did you? Is that how you came across more New Age ideas? Trying to say, has anyone else had this experience? Am I going crazy, or how was your process with that?
So a lot of things have happened like after that experience, which, because what you have to understand is like I was so young. I think I was in sixth grade.
That's right. Yeah.
And yeah, I was in sixth grade, and I think I woke up, and maybe I was in fifth or sixth grade, and I woke up, and it's actually so isolating in a way because you almost have to push it back into your subconscious. Otherwise, it's like you would be walking around thinking, what what was that? Like all the time. And for, I would say for weeks I wasn't like normal. like like something about me was just like off in terms of like how I was communicating with people, and it just gave me a really different perspective. So what I'm trying to say is that it takes a really, really long time to integrate the amount of knowledge and the amount of vibration and energy that you get um, in that state. So one, I didn't understand it. I knew that, you know, what I saw did exist, and I knew that um, in my daily life, the things that I experienced, that's not all there is. But beyond that, it's like I hadn't even studied geometry at that point. But like in this state, there were all of these like crazy geometric shapes that were like changing and moving, and like it was like a hyper-dimensional space too. And now, you know, I understand that, like I can understand the physics of it a little bit more. But at 11, I didn't even know what physics was. So it's like to understand it on a scientific level, there was no chance. And then to understand it on like a spiritual level, I think part of myself was like, that was real, but it was also a dream. And I was talking about it as if it was a dream for a long time. And so then as life went on, um, life goes on, you get older, you get hurt by people, you get traumatized, things happen, and then you're like, the memory starts to go away, or this knowing that you had during this experience, it starts to go away. And so for me, I was like, actually I got baptized when I was a sophomore in high school, because I got older and things were happening, and I wanted to connect back to this thing. And the only way I knew how was through the church at the time. So I thought that through connecting to Catholicism, I would like maybe like find my way back there, or find my way to that, like that sense of connectedness. And it didn't happen. And I felt very isolated again. And then, yeah, life went on. I went to school, I went to college. I started getting depressed actually towards the end of high school, a little bit in college. And then in college, I went through my spiritual awakening, which was where I got into more of the new age stuff, in terms of crystals and in terms of like dimensions and all that stuff. But the reason I got into it wasn't because I was looking for new age. It's because things started happening to me, in my dreams, what I thought were dreams. And so somehow through this state of, I wouldn't say despair, but the state of kind of being unsure and being scared, I attracted someone to me who was able to help me through that process where I had this spiritual awakening. So, so for a lot of these things, it's like I didn't invite them to my life; they just like happened to me. But then I found um, a lot of these new age things or spirituality in general that helped guide me through my experiences.
That's a really good point. How you had this experience when you were younger, so you weren't seeking out some supernatural phenomenon; it just happened to you. And also, too, you said when you were in college, you weren't necessarily seeking out new age, but you found someone to help, I guess, clarify some things, or help you understand some things for yourself.
Yeah.
And I that really going back to like the testimonials on YouTube, that the common trend I tend to see are individuals who kind of grew up in Western culture as Christians. They don't get answers that they want from Christianity, and they find out, and it's usually some trauma is involved, depression, despair, what have you. And
Yeah.
then they find usually it's like self-help books, and they try to get their individual power back, so to speak. And that kind of leads to like rabbit holes, like go from I'm trying to heal, and then now you're thinking I'm literally God incarnate. And so it kind of, and then, so I guess my question or is, do you notice that trend too, that people tend to get into new age because of some past trauma, or sort of like lack of answers or clarity within their worldview, or their place in the world, and trying to make sense of that, plus that overcome some trauma.
Yeah, I think it's a trend that I saw too when I was watching the videos. It seemed like the reason for the movement towards it was to gain control over their life somehow. And we all go through that feeling where we don't feel like we're in control, or feeling like we have a loss of control, or that we want to, maybe we've done bad things and we want to get back to like a more holy place. And so we do whatever we can. We buy the self help books. We change our diet. We do this. We do that. We change our friends. We change our environment. We move to a different place. Like, so I think that's all a part of the same. Um, it's almost like it can be escapism, but with the whole new age thing, I think that what attracted people to it was this alternative, and was this or is this kind of way that we can, yeah, take our own power back. And that's not bad. And I think that is a lot of what spirituality is about. It's hard work, because it's you're getting knowledge from essentially other aspects of yourself, whether that's through God, or if you believe in a higher self, if you believe in guides or angels or things like that. So you're getting this higher knowledge essentially, and you're trying to insert that knowledge into your daily, like, normal life. And that's where it can get difficult. And so what I saw with that was, in terms of the videos, it was like when people started having maybe like bad experiences, or started having, maybe they were getting scared about what New Age was bringing to them in terms of feelings, in terms of uncomfortable feelings. It's not. It's really uncomfortable. Um, I think that might have made them see it. Oh, that's bad. That's like dark. That's I saw a lot of like Luciferian or that's Satanism or whatever. Not understanding that like um, we are constantly interacting with parts of ourself or shadows of ourself, things that we are not addressing within us. So if you go to sleep and you have a night terror or you encounter beings or demonic entities or whatever, that is actually just telling you that there's something in your life that you need to work on and that there's a reason you're attracting that. And it doesn't go away just because like we pretend it's not there. Like it's so when you start seeing things on that level, it can actually be this really helpful healing thing, but it's not easy and it's not as quick as just maybe people think that it's going to be this fun thing about like using crystals and stuff, but it is hard work. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think for me, it was like 2014, 2015. I was going through law school. I was going through a very like dark time in my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was, I grew up in a Christian church, and I was trying to find answers within, I mean, backing up a little bit more. When I was younger, I was like you, always was very curious about like, I don't know if you were ever saw those shows on History Channel. It was like banned from the Bible or like books that were then making to the Bible or whatever like that. So yeah, like really like
No.
yeah, there I love those. I was like 10 years old. This is the best show ever. But I always got shot down at church because I would talk to my friend whose dad was an elder. It's like, oh, Jared, that's not what it's true. I'm like, oh, but really? It was more, I won't say fantastical, but it was more like esoteric and seemed truer to what the teachings of the Bible were, as opposed to just like more. I don't like using the word dogmatic because it sounds really like condemning, but that's the best word, dogmatic theology. So, but for me, it was like I was really in a really dark time in my life, and I was trying to find answers within like Christianity, and I came across this sermon by, I think he was like a Pan African or more of like the, I guess the conscious community or the Black community or whatever. And so he basically he did this sermon, and it just completely shattered my worldview because he wasn't Christian, right? So he just like he used scripture to defend his points of his ideas. And like, I never read the Bible personally. It's like, oh, wow, he must be like right because I'd never seen these verses before. And that's what kind of led me to exploring, I guess, more new age stuff because it was similar to what he was talking about. But the only he would say he wouldn't classify himself as new age, but it was more of like being like self exploration, trying to find yourself, trying to find your place in the world, and also Hill trying to find like hope and despair, right? And like
Yeah.
I agree that it's not that's not like a knock against new age saying that people get into it because they're trying to heal. Everyone's trying to heal from something.
Right.
And just some people, they turn to religion, some turn to spirituality, some turn to drugs, some turn to the, I don't know.
Yeah. Anything.
all kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
But that kind of leads me into my next question with the, or actually one more thing on that. It seems like the trends and the testimonials that people who tended to have these really negative experiences and like seeing dark entities having weird out of body experiences, was, you give me your thoughts on this, but it seemed like they were got into new age for the fantastical phenomena itself. Like they wanted to be able to have out of body experiences. They wanted like clairvoyance, clairaudience, as opposed to simply trying to understand like yourself and God. And it seems like those individuals who get into whatever type of religion or whatever type of spirituality, trying to like find truth, don't really have those negative experiences because they're pure intentions, I guess.
So so with New Age spirituality, I feel like I connect to what the guy was saying who was talking about the sermons. I, I think that spirituality right now, what's being popularized is really just like spirituality that's in the new age. And we are in the new age in a lot of ways because of technology, and we just there aren't as many of us that are willing to enter into the same systems that have existed in place for hundreds of years. So I think that's the only thing about spirituality that makes it new age, and the fact that people are taking and understanding different concepts from different parts of the world because we have access to it now, which is great. Um, and then on the note about the people who are looking for something fantastical, I don't think that's I don't think it's bad, but I think that sometimes when we're seeking like the dazzling aspect of something, we aren't willing to work through what we need to work through in order to get there. Because there is this aspect of spirituality that is really beautiful and really fantastical, and you can have wonderful visions, and you can lucid dream, and like you can learn to create your dreams, and you can fly. Like all those things are possible, but it's like you don't get there by like you don't get there quickly. You don't get there. It takes work. You gotta clean your psyche and like heal and get through the trauma, and so that you're in a place where you have that a lot more control, and where your heart is doesn't have as much of the crust on it, so it's
Mhm.
naturally leading you to beautiful things. um, and that's hard because a lot of us have been through a lot. That's the nature of life, but we can't just get into something and expect it to all be peaches and cream day one. It's yeah, and for me, with the experience that I had, I don't understand why I had it when I was very young. I guess I was very lucky. Um, and if I didn't have that, I wouldn't know the beautiful side of what spirituality can be, because when I was in college I had experiences with yeah, dark entities, bad experiences with astral projection, which I wasn't even trying to do myself. I would just find myself like falling out of my bed and like looking at my body, and I was like, what's what's happening? And then
Yeah.
I would be normal in my like daily life, but I was just very stressed out and very like anxious and depressed at certain points. But yeah, there is that aspect of it, but then there is the other side, which is very beautiful. But it again, um, you don't get there in a day.
Yeah, for sure. I know for me, like there's something that I needed like personally to like know that it was true, that these are like these possibilities are true,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
I don't necessarily have to practice them myself. Like I like like I need to know that like life goes on after death. I need to know that like these really cool phenomena is like it happens in real life, but I'm not necessarily I don't need to do it myself, which I guess is kind of like a I know which I kind of so I have my own practices and things like that, but I still kind of like talking to people in quote new age because they're kind of like they're hippies and so they like to talk about weird stuff.
Yeah.
So I enjoy the conversations and like hearing about like the nature of the universe and reality. But I'm always trying to like try to check myself and make sure my intentions are pure what I'm trying to do.
That's awesome. I love that.
Yeah,
That's very hard to do.
cool. Um, so do you think that for like the testimonials, it seems like there are a lot of I'm not sure what traditions you personally studied individually, but it seems like the ones that they talk about primarily are like the yogic tradition, sometimes Kabbalah, Freemasonry, Western occultism, and it seems like they all learn it on a very superficial level, and then when they convert out of it, they really speak like bad about it, even though their teacher who taught them the material wasn't like the source text, and it wasn't they were just like a Westerner like them who just kind of read a blog or whatever. So
Yeah.
so do you think that the misconstrue of like these teachings is like, I don't know, I guess like what are your thoughts on that? Just like how New Age kind of like can take something so sacred as like a, I don't know, Taoism or Kabbalah and Jewish mysticism and just say that it's like that's of the devil now.
Yeah, that's a really, really good point. It's like taking the most superficial aspects and then like wanting to like reap all the rewards from it without doing the actual work. And I actually touched on this a little bit in that video where it's like uh, Western countries, America tends to commercialize and try to make as much money off of the the thing that's becoming popular, the next
Mhm.
thing. So if spirituality, spiritual teachers who have dedicated their lives to this and they're like, starting to put their platforms online and they're actually gaining traction and things like that, you see a lot of like higher forces that are like, oh, we have to get on that boat too. And then it just becomes this thing of how much money can we make off of this. I mean, it's not intentional and it's never conscious, but that's like part of the American way.
Yeah.
So what happens is that this thing that becomes trendy and hot and cool or whatever, you might not ever pick up a book that's talking about Taoist practices, and you might not really understand qi and how qi is um, in Taoist understandings is, the fluid that rises through the body, and when you can control that fluid, you can control your energy flow and have power over your own energy flow, and use that as a way to be connected to nature. And then it goes deeper into that. It goes into the morals and the ethics and how being humble allows you to be closer to that place of God, and letting go allows you to be closer to that place of near God or whatever, or part of God. And then, in the same way that you could be a Christian and be a really good Christian, and then you could be a Christian and then not understand Christ conscious, the teachings of Christ, and you will not be that person that takes other people as a part of yourself, and then you could be a very selfish person. So within anything, it doesn't matter what it is, what religious practice it is. If you don't have the morals, the teachings, the understandings, it's not going to go well for you, because you're just getting that surface level aspect to it and thinking that you're going to really feel the benefits of it, but you can't. Everything takes work, no
Right.
matter what it is. And it takes time. And for me, I'm just now, like, within the past few years, like, really reading, okay, like with Hinduism, like they talk about the Kundalini energy. Kundalini is very, it's like the Taoist chi energy essentially. And then, it's in Western text, I feel like I touched on it a little bit, the oil in the back, or maybe that's Kabbalah. But anyway,
Same concept.
yeah, same concept, similar
Right.
concepts. So it's like understanding that, but then understanding how to connect with that flow and the emotions that you need to hold in your body to connect with that flow, to be humble, to have gratitude. And it's not in this dogmatic way, and like, not like you have to do this or you're going to hell. It's just like, try to be a good person, essentially, and like try to be in harmony with nature, and then the rest kind of comes easily. But I think that in these testimonials, like sometimes people have used the fact that there are like false teachers and like used certain things as examples for why like all aspects of New Age are bad, and it doesn't make sense, because it's like, okay, those are particular people who are practicing these rituals or whatever, but don't have the ethics and the morals behind it. So, yeah. the outcome might be bad. But again, that's with anything that you do. It doesn't make the whole thing bad.
That was a really good point. I think people are just people within. I mean, there are good Buddhists, not so great Buddhists, good Christians, not so great Christians, and any tradition, there's going to be people who try to uphold to the highest like morality and ethics, and there are people who just don't really care.
Exactly.
So it's like,
Exactly.
and so I think like sometimes in the West, at least I did when I was more interested in more Eastern religions, I thought they were like higher, they were better. And then
Mm.
I imagined my uh, disillusionment when I saw people in that tradition who were the exact same.
Yeah, like
as
rapists,
yeah,
rapist yoga teachers and
exactly.
things like that.
And I guess I come from more of a yoga background. And so I guess I was just lucky in that regard. I had good teachers who weren't crazy, I guess. Or like they were like true practitioners of yoga. And so
Yeah.
when I hear these testimonials that say that yoga is evil, it confuses me because if a Hindu says that they practice yoga, they don't necessarily just mean like hatha yoga or like the postures.
That's true.
It's like there are various types. There's like, so if a Christian says that yoga is evil, okay, so that karma yoga, selfless action, giving
Yeah.
toward God, that's evil. Bhakti yoga, devotion toward God, that's
Right.
evil. Jnana yoga, studying the scriptures, which includes the Bible, if that's your tradition,
Wow.
and like Raja Yoga, contemplation. So it's, or like almsgiving for Karma Yoga. So all these virtues and things are with highly regarding Christianity, just because they're called something else in another tradition, they're automatically like evil. One teacher I had, he said that the mere fact of praying and devotion to God automatically raises your Kundalini. And I don't think that Christians are going to stop praying because it's just like, I know, I think the words are associated with negative experiences because I don't know, maybe they have, I don't know, they want to do some weird stuff, but it's just, I always kind of like, not cringe, but it's always like, okay, you don't really know what you're talking about because
Yeah.
if you did, because you wouldn't be a Christian if you believe this, right?
Right, right. That's a really good point. That is a really good point. Gosh, what did I want to say to that? Um, that's the thing. I think that people in the Western world and maybe worldwide, I don't know, but we all kind of want to believe that what we're doing is the right way, and every other way is evil or bad or is going to take you to hell. If you don't do it this way, you're not getting into heaven. And I remember watching those videos, and I myself, I practice yoga as well, mostly Kundalini, but I I got a little scared. I was like, "Oh, yoga's demonic." It makes me feel so balanced and like I'm so happy, and like after I do yoga, I'm so like nice to other people, and like how is that? Even with all the knowledge that I have, it's like the way the arguments were set up about how no, that's the wrong way, like that's demonic or that's satanic or whatever, and I was like, that's so confusing to me because all that I know for sure about yoga is that it makes me more connected to my body. It releases stress hormones, or actually, sorry, it lowers stress
Mm-hmm.
hormones, reduces them. There are the spiritual aspects of it, and then the physical aspects of it as well that are all good. So that was really jarring to me was listening to the dogmatic nature of these like testimonials, because it was making me feel like I was a bad person when I don't believe that. And going back to the previous statement about how everybody wants to feel like what they're doing is the right way, that isn't that concept doesn't exist on a higher dimension, because if we're talking about God, God has everything. Everything is encompassed within God, whether that's Islam, whether that's Christianity, Catholicism, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, like whatever you believe in. every perspective is going to be a part of God, meaning that everything is okay as long as you're a good person and as long as you're practicing things that are connecting you to that one ultimate source. So yeah, when it comes to the whole you're not doing it right because this is the way. That's my one issue with Christianity is that it's so often in its history you have people that are trying to tell you that you're doing it wrong. Um, Obviously, not with everybody. I'm not saying all Christians are like this, of course not. But with this testimonial thing, it's almost like it's mirroring patterns of that sort of mentality where it's like you have to only subscribe to what I believe in. But there's room for everyone.
Yeah, that's kind of like how I remember when I was really young, but I remember asking my friend, like, do you think that God created multiple religions so that could connect with them through their like particular temperament? And he was like, absolutely not. That can't be true.
I was just thinking that's so well said. Like, yeah, of
I was
course.
like, oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. And like,
Yeah.
no. And so one of the reasons why I had a lot of, I guess, mm, cognitive dissonance in my own mind was that like I always feel like, well, if Christianity is true and my friend who is Jewish or my friend who is Hindu is seeking the truth as well, why don't they convert to Christianity if they're seeking the truth? And if their religion is the true, and I'm obviously seeking truth, why don't I feel compelled to convert to their religion? And so I was really confused. And I was like, well, everyone seems to be like, oh yeah, the Christianity is the only religion. If it's only because you don't really love God, you don't really want to know the truth that you don't convert. I'm like, well, my friends they pray more than me. They go to their temples more than I go to church. They seem to love God more than I do. I just happen to be born in the correct uh, religion, so to speak. And so that was another kind of like catalyst for me trying to like make sense of, but I always say like, I'm the only one who has to live with my conscience. And it's like, well, I don't like feeling like at ease with, or unease with like, what's the truth? Everyone seems to know the truth, but me. So, but yeah, it seems like the, and that kind of brings me to the next question about like why only Christians convert, like the Christian New Age to Christianity conversion, as opposed to like New Age to Islam, New Age to Judaism, New Age to Hinduism. Like, what are your thoughts on like why it seems to be just Christianity? Like, I understand that Christianity is obviously the largest religion in the world, but do you have any other ideas why that doesn't seem to go the other way?
Yeah. So I have a lot of thoughts on this. Some of them are a little too esoteric. Like I don't want to get into an alien conversation because it's just a whole nother bag. But when we're talking about what we can see and observe, on that level, it seems to be that um, like what I was talking about before with Christianity, where in the past there's this history of colonialism and like going into places like Africa and telling the people there that you should worship this God because if you kind of stay where you're at right now, you're not going to be civilized or you're not going to be able to move up energetically or spiritually or whatever. And then another example I've used is like, with Native Americans in America, with the whole process of turning Native Americans into more quote unquote civilized people or whatever, and changing the way that they were dressing, changing the way that they were interacting with each other, and they were forced to learn English and study Christianity and things like that. So it's the history of it. It tends to repeat itself in this way, where it's like anything that's like oppositional, people feel like they have to convert them to the right thing, quote unquote. And why that is, I think it's in, sometimes these things are in the texts themselves, where because within like the Bible, it's like you must worship me and only me. Like you have to worship Jesus, and like you have to do this, you have to do that. It is more dogmatic than, let's say, certain other ancient traditions that are like following. If you look at other traditions, sometimes depending on which one it is, if it's more Eastern, they tend to follow source energy or like the ultimate God energy. Whereas I think with Christianity, it seems to be like there seems to be some like severed connection with that for some reason. I don't know why. I haven't studied the Bible as much to understand that. But from what I have read, it seems as though like, you have to understand, you have to follow Jesus or whatever. Like there's this figure that you have to worship in order to kind of get to the higher God, in a sense. Like there's so having to go through this consciousness before reaching a higher consciousness, it means that you have to like um, there's that repenting, and then feeling that you have to submit to this one figure, because otherwise you won't get your ticket into heaven. So there is that kind of thing where it's like there's so much pressure, because it's like you have to do things a certain way in order to get back to source or God. Whereas in maybe Taoism or Buddhism or other new age, quote unquote, traditions or spirituality, there isn't that like middle man. You can choose to work with that, quote unquote, middleman, whatever, whether that's an angel or a prophet or whatever, but it's not necessary. It's like the new age philosophy or aspects of it tend to focus more on your own connection to spirit, and that you have a spirit and that you should connect to your higher spirit, and that you're these kinds of, and your higher spirit is also yourself, though, you know what I mean? And so that's why meditation is important, because you're connecting to your higher self, which can then connect you to God. Whereas I think in Christianity, it's like you have to go to something else, someone else. Um, yeah, and it makes people feel like, oh my gosh, like I'm scared. Like if I don't do this, like I'm not going to get to the higher realm. We have to tell everyone. We have to tell everyone that they have to worship Jesus. Otherwise, they're not gonna make it. You know what I mean? So it creates
Right.
this kind of like fear mentality, I think.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely agree with that. Just because the theology of like the afterlife is like who's going to make it, who's not going to make it, and it makes sense. Like you love your friends, your family, you want to see them like now and the hereafter. So
Right.
and it definitely makes sense why you'd be like concerned, like why if that's your worldview, right?
Yeah.
And for me, on my personal note, it was really kind of bizarre for me because my teachers in the, I guess you call it Sanatana Dharma, the Vedic tradition, they were pretty strong and they didn't want me to like leave my childhood religion, and they want me to like stick with that, but still take like the teachings that they had to offer. And their purpose or their meaning behind that was because to like, um, I believe it was the Sermon on the Mount that Christ says, like, blessed are the pure in heart, because they will see God. And like in your devotional practices, like we're talking about earlier, feeling really connected with a particular symbol or archetype or manifestation of God or God Himself, it's really speaks to you on like a heart level, as
Mm,
opposed to doing chanting mantras that may be sacred to someone who's Indian, but they're just words to you in English.
yeah.
Whereas you grew up with Christ, you grew up with the Bible, so it touches you in a very deep way. And from
Mm,
my experience, that leads to very deep like contemplations and meditation, that you feel like connected to it more so.
yeah.
And so I think the like, I know, like I said, I just been blessed to have teachers who trying to make me like think straight as opposed to getting lost in a fantasy world.
Right.
But it seems like those people who learn these other traditions don't learn from authentic sources. They don't learn from like they don't read the source text. And even like source text, like the Bible. Like I read, so I got really interested in Christianity back like in 2018 again. But I feel like I kind of like called toward it. And so I read through the New Testament the first time in my life, and I was like, I had no idea how people got like the doctrines they did from the Bible, because when I read
You
it,
read it differently.
yeah, it was like, oh, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever read. But it makes no sense how where the theology like got came from. I guess because I spent more time in, I guess, contemplation, just really trying to like find truth or whatever. So it just made like more. It was clear to me what it was saying. But when I hear these testimonials saying that like, no, this is what it means, I'm like, I don't think that's what it means. So I don't know. It's interesting, even within like the Christian tradition, like Catholicism or Eastern Orthodoxy or the contemplative prayer. Even that's getting like backlash, saying that like that's like demonic because they emphasize meditation, contemplation, like fasting, things like that, like more ascetic endeavors. Um, and so it's just confusing, I guess.
Well, you make a really good point because, I grew up with Catholicism, and I think that now I actually have the Bible over here, but I told myself I was going to read through it again because it your teachers are right, I believe, because where you're born, I assume you're American, right? I
Yeah.
wouldn't
Yeah.
ask. You could have been Canadian for all I know. But, you know, we are connected to Christ just because of like where we were born and the history of America, things like that. So, and how you grew up and how I grew up within a Catholic family. So there is going to be that connection for me. And there was this one time um, it was like what happened? Sleep paralysis. That's the word I was trying to look for. Sleep paralysis. And this was during a period of time where I was going through a lot. I was very lost. I tried doing certain things to stop the paralysis because I was hearing something that was in my room. And if you like go to New Age, it just tells you to fill yourself up with light, right? Or they talk about different practices that you can do to combat yourself, to combat yourself in that situation. This is like spiritual warfare, quote unquote. But I tried to like fill myself up with light and fill myself up with positivity, but I didn't have it at the time because I was so low in my emotions that I couldn't get this feeling away from me or whatever, this quote unquote demonic entity. So that I tried everything, and then it was like lasting a long time. So the last thing that I did was I said Jesus's name, and the whole thing stopped, and I woke up. So for me, something that I do want to emphasize is that like it's not wrong to believe in Christ. Like that's not bad at all. I believe in Christ consciousness, and I believe that you can use what you were drawn to, but it is like your yoga teacher said. There's that connection that you had because you connected to it when you were a child, and it is a part of you. So it is something that you can build upon, you can expand upon. But the danger for me comes in when you feel like this is your only connection to source. So this is your only connection to God. And if you don't follow everything to a T, you're banished or whatever, you're going to hell. And like what you said about the scriptures, when you're listening to someone, it depends on who your teacher is. Who your teacher is. It depends on your priest. It depends on who is giving you this information. It's going to be tainted from their perspective because we're humans. We have our own perspectives. So if you were going to a church because you've gone to this church your whole life and your family goes to this church, whatever, and you've just like never felt connected, then it might be that priest. It might be who's giving that information to you. So I think it is very, very good to be able to live your life, have your own experiences, dabble and learn from other cultures and their religious teachings and things like that. And then if you want to go back to the Bible later and read it, and you'll have your own connection to it, your own understanding to it, and you can see that it might not be um, uh, understood the way that you understand it. And in that sense, it can be freeing. But I think it's more so just the ability for people to have that choice and stuff. And that is a problem with New Age. Actually, is that sometimes it's not grounded within the the real teachings and the practices, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier in the conversation, where people just kind of go to do the fun things and like don't understand the real depth of it and the real teachings behind it.
Yeah,
So,
exactly.
yeah.
I think that your experience with like calling out the Christ was a pretty common within the testimonials as well. Like nothing else worked, so I called on Jesus, and then it stops, and so now I know the Bible is true. And when I hear that, it's like, yes, that's true. But I think they mean it in a different way that I understand it. Just like when I read the Bible, it's a different understanding than them. So like they'll say like I converted because the Bible is true. Yes, the Bible is true, but they're like, no, no other book is the
Yeah,
truth. I was
exactly,
like, we're talking about they're saying the
exactly.
same thing.
Can I tell you this before?
Sure.
So what I meant to add to that about that one experience. So I had that experience, and by the way, when this has happened to me before, and it's happened to me enough times for me to know what to do in these situations if it comes about, and I know what to do actually now to prevent these situations, which is even better. But when it comes to sleep paralysis, there were other things that I could do, but in that moment, the other tactics weren't working. So then I used Jesus' name that did work. But actually, I think it was 2 nights ago, I had this kind of weird slight sleep paralysis. It wasn't really that serious. It was actually the day after I uploaded my video. So I don't know if I was getting bad energy towards me from like a Christian who watched it. I don't know. But I woke up and I was in this paralysis state. And what I did was I envisioned the feeling and the like hyperdimensional circle of life. Um, and the whole experience stopped within zero point 0.5 seconds of me
Wow.
envisioning it. So when I think of that flower of life, that was my reflection in terms of um, me being a part of God. And different religions talk about this. It's called the Merkaba in some places, and then it's also called like the circle of life, the tree of life, things like that.
Mhm.
But using that image, and then with yoga, sometimes they're seeing like the Buddha or the hyperdimensional flower,
Lotus, yeah.
essentially the lotus. Yes, so it's essentially I was visualizing that because it's something from my experience that I know and that I've seen, and it gave me essentially the power I needed. So I wanted to add to that because it's like not just there are other ways to get out of these situations other than Jesus, because you can't just say that in your testimony because it makes everything else completely invalid, which is not true.
Yeah, yeah. And I think like everyone has their own personal, unique connection to God that's very unique to them. And I think that if you are more religious or spiritually inclined when you're younger, that's a really strong bond you have. And what my teachers were trying to explain to me was that, like, yes, you're interested in our ideas of God, but it's not authentically God to you as you connect with them. Like, how do you connect with God personally? You don't, and it's not like there's no names, there's no mantras. It's like, what do you need to do to connect to like the ultimate power consciousness
Yeah.
being in the universe? Like, how do you personally do that? And so I think within New Age, they kind of glorify every religion except for Christianity. I think
Mm-hmm.
that's because as Westerners, they were maybe hurt by it, disillusioned by it, And
I
so it's
think
like,
so.
oh, it's not even that important. But also, I don't think it really helps though when like the dogma is so, I don't know what the word is, but it just isn't really inspiring for some people. Some people they love it, and that's what they need. Some people they feel like they need more. And I feel like I feel like if Christianity got more respect in New Age, then these probably things wouldn't happen. But then
Yeah.
again, I don't think New Age. I don't think you have. I don't know. I'm just rambling.
No, it's a good point. I see what you're saying there for sure.
Let's see here. What else do I have here? We kind of already talked about this, but do you think that like Eastern religions and other religions outside Christianity are very cultural? And so they're so cultural to the point where people who kind of go into them like superficially, it's kind of like they don't really understand the depths of the symbols, the archetypes of themselves. And so when they go into it, I don't know, they kind of fall in it's easier to fall into fantasy, I think. And because there is a great deal of mysticism in these other traditions, there also is in Christianity, but unless you're like an Eastern Orthodox Christian who's a monk or a Catholic monk who has very like profound experiences in meditation, then these aren't really talked about a lot in Christianity. Do you think it's easier to fall into like fantasy and they want to do these things and then they have really bad experiences and then they run back to something else? Or
You said a couple different interesting things. So okay, I'm gonna have to divide these two things about the fantastical and the other one's about the culture. Okay, so the first one want to talk about culture.
sure.
Basically, yeah, if I'm someone who is from the Western world and I don't have any connection to Christianity or religion in general, and I'm just searching for something, and then I get really into yoga and I get really into that kind of the philosophies that come from that, and then I want to do Kundalini yoga all day, and I want to do the chants and the mantras, and that is something that in order to get fully into it, you do have to really give up a lot of your identity because it is so foreign in terms of the language, in terms of the symbols, in terms of the mantras. You don't even understand like what's being said. Like someone has to tell you what's being said in order for you to like get it.
Mm-hmm.
So there's that's a lot to take on. So unless you're like serious about it, you can't fully envelop yourself in that kind of religion unless you want to. Of course you can, but um, it's this thing where you have to. There is a lot of like cultural loss. So then people tend to like only focus on certain aspects of it without getting the teachings portion of it. And like you can do these practices and like honor the philosophy behind it without fully going all the way there. So there's definitely a way to do it, and it's important to incorporate that. You know, with yoga, you're incorporating. Okay, this is why I do this pose. This is why we do these poses together. This like is all a part of the same kind of. When you combine these poses together, you create this, and so I think that's important to understand for sure. Um, but yeah, so with the whole cultural thing, I'm saying this to say that it's helpful to have that sort of base religious understanding from wherever you came from before you explored. So, so then you can have like a good amount of, I don't even know what other word to say other than meat, but like a good amount of meat from both to like pull from, I guess. Um, and then the second thing about the fantastic sort of revelations and things like that, the visions, I think that that's a really good point to make is that I don't think I've ever met a Christian or a Catholic that I've known that really focuses on those things at all or like has talked about them. So for me, I I don't know who I talked to after I had that experience that I had. I talked to my mom, and then tried to talk to my friends about it, and obviously, like, like went over everyone's head. No one
Yeah.
knew what I was talking about, and then I wasn't like communicating it effectively either because it's like, how do I communicate something that I don't understand? Um, but yeah, it's with the whole fantastical thing. I think now, us as millennials, especially, you have people that are more into like doing acid or doing like shrooms or doing like
Hmm.
drugs, experimental things like that. So I think we are more exposed to the fantastical anyway because we're in America and like we just like have access to all of these things. Because if you're not like fully in the Christian faith, like fully going to church all the time and like, or Catholic or whatever it is, then you're going to be exposed to different things. You go to college, like you're going to, um, people will talk about their experiences. And so I think in that sense, it makes those people who had come from that religion maybe curious. Maybe they've gone off to a different place, they moved away from home. They're like, what else is there like see? Like, wow, like people are seeing God, they're experiencing God, and like I've never had this like own connection myself. So maybe that's what like really pulls them towards new age is this hope like, oh, I can see like beautiful fractals and oh, I can see like, I don't know what people see on their trips, like maybe what numbers in the sky, who knows, but um so maybe that's a part of it is like seeking that, and then they get into it and then, oh, I see demons and like like
Yeah.
entities, and I see like, uh-oh, like, so then they feel like they don't have a sense of control and they're like, whoa, like I just want to go back to where it was safe and I wasn't seeing anything and like I wasn't experiencing or hearing things. So in that sense, I think maybe that's part of what attracts them to it. So
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Yeah. You made a lot of good points there. I think like because there isn't like a really strong foundation, because I think in New Age, they pick from so many different traditions and different ideas that there isn't really like a solid like foundation. It's like, well, you can do this, you can do that, you can do this, but there's no like basis, so to speak. Whereas if you have a basis in a really like tried and true tradition, yeah, you're set in your practices, you're set in your way of life, and you can learn about other cultures, even the New Age culture, so to speak, and still maintain your foundation. I mean, that's just like with anything in life. Like you have strong moral foundation, ethic foundation from like your upbringing, your family, and things like that. So you can interact with people who maybe aren't so great, but that's not going to like sway you because you have that you're set already.
Mm. Yeah, if you have that, you're really lucky. Definitely. It's good to have that like support and stuff. It can be hard sometimes because, like for me, I had to have all of these fantastical things, and then like it happened in reverse. So like I had the things happen to me, and then I had to like, now I'm like trying to understand symbols because I'll see certain things in my dreams a lot. Like I'll see an animal in my dream a lot, and then I'm like, oh, okay, like what does that mean? And then I read the Bible and I see this is an animal that comes up a lot. This is what it represents. Or I'll read something else, and then it helps you in terms of just having the knowledge aspect of it.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think. Yeah, I mean, I mean, I guess the only reason I say that is because sometimes I watched one the other day, a testimonial of this lady. She said she was like, essentially, she became like psychotic from practicing yoga. She was hallucinating. She thought she killed someone by chanting Shiva's name. Very
Oh
like
no.
obviously like mentally disturbed. And I think that's like I said, if you're not rooted in anything, like or grounded at least in this reality, then you
Mm,
can just take off to who knows where and never
yeah.
come back, or never fully come back to who you were before. And
Yeah,
that's what I was
you
saying with
have
like the
to,
yeah.
yeah, you have to definitely be able to, if we're thinking about like the chakra system, for instance, like you have to be able to access that, but then like come back to earth because we're here for a reason, I think. And like for me, I've had during my spiritual awakening, I had a lot of what could definitely be seen as like psychotic um, thinking. I never had any episodes where anything crazy happened. I was just like very quietly scared and like
Yeah.
very quietly anxious about like what I was feeling. And I would say this like the worst of it lasted for like a couple months. And I was in school and I wasn't sleeping and going out. And so all of that combined just like, created for like an unsound mind. I never thought I killed anyone, so I was never on that level. That's like that's very disturbing. But I was seeing things in my dreams that were really uncomfortable. I was seeing things in like um, during like sleep paralysis that were uncomfortable. Um, but yeah, I think my point is on that like there are a lot of fantastical things. Um, I still don't know what exactly is created and I'm talking like more on like dreams and like
Hmm.
out of not like this physical dimension, but I don't know what sort of phenomenons are created and how much of that is my own kind of psyche or whatever. And
Hmm.
so I think that's where we need to be a little bit more careful when we're talking about um, things that have happened to us and talking about our our perceptions of things, because we really like, unless you're really connected to God and really like getting information consistently, you'll be confused. You'll be confused by the symbols that you see. You'll be confused by um, everything that's going on, and that's the part where it can become dangerous. Because if you're like into the new age stuff and you don't have your own grounding of like who you are, you're susceptible to like anything.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And that kind of reminded me of one of my teachers. He brought up a email that he got from one of his students, and she was basically saying that she was going through a lot of like mental anguish, a lot of like mental disturbances, and she asked like what kind of spiritual practices she could do to like help it. And
Mhm.
his response was, "You should probably go to a therapist."
Oh, really?
And so it's like you're rooted in like reality here, but you're
Mhm.
also able to like explore the depths of like who knows how high you can go, whatever. So it's like not disowning the help you can get here, like
Mm.
a doctor, as opposed to like I'm going to take this magical substance that will heal my problems, where you can go to the doctor and get like a prescription or or whatever.
Right.
So you have to you don't want to become like addicted to like therapy or addicted to like prescription drugs. But when someone says to like I'm going through an issue, what can I do spiritually? What crystal can I buy? I'm always like
Mhm.
kind of like, okay, maybe they don't really, I don't know what, I probably wouldn't take their advice. I have two more questions. The first one is kind of loaded, I guess, but how would you personally describe religion versus spirituality?
Religion would be something that I am fully devoted to. It's something that I would be taking most of my energy towards, and I would take it seriously in the sense that, well, I don't really like that phrase. Depends on how you're using it, but I would devote a lot of my energy towards it. I would probably be closed minded towards other things. And if I was following a religion, uh, it would be a part of my everyday life. It would not just be this thing that I um, connect with, but something that I would use in my everyday life as well. But that's just me personally. Is this just like a general definition, or is this like how for me?
For you personally,
For
yeah. I
me
mean,
personally?
yeah.
Okay.
You're not speaking for everybody.
Okay.
So
Thank you. Oh, so glad I don't have that burden. Okay.
pressure's off.
Yeah. Um, so yeah, for me, if I followed a religion, I would probably do similar things every day. I would eat according to whatever that religion would tell me to eat. I would um, only follow whatever teachings that that religion had, and I would be closed off to other religions. New Age spirituality, or what I like to call spirituality in the New Age, the difference with that is that I'm following the connection that I have to source energy and God. And through that, I am understanding the messages that I get through source, through dreams, through meditation and connecting with my spirit, through the body as well, through yoga, through eating in a way that allows me to operate to my, I wouldn't say highest potential, but yeah, sure, highest potential in terms of my potential to connect the flow on a daily basis to my body. And yeah, I think New Age spirituality, whatever, spirituality in New Age for me means that I can explore certain symbols, certain doctrines, and kind of see myself reflected in that as well. And take what is beneficial and kind of, you know, not really connect to what I'm not connecting to, um, which might sound bad to some people, but that's what I do.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I was gonna say that, like, I think maybe like a few years ago, I was gonna make a video on this topic because I always like New Age and spirit to Christianity. I was interested in what people thought about religion versus spirituality, and I came across a lot of videos of them saying like, well, religion is for people who are afraid of going to hell, and spirituality is for those who have already been there, and things like that.
Wow.
So I was like, yeah, that's pretty interesting.
Wow, that's kind of true though, actually. And in my okay, well, for me, I don't see a difference in time. Time is like it only exists here. We're on Earth. We're constricted to time and like following it and being on time. But I know that there are unhealed aspects of myself. And so those unhealed aspects of myself, I tend to see sometimes, and especially through my awakening. The awakening was just me connecting to the fact that I was very unhealed because prior to the whole awakening, I was someone that was like pretending, and this was when I wasn't connected to any religion or anything. Um, but I used to like hold in all my emotions. I would just kind of go through the day, go to school, get my work done. I wasn't feeling good, but I wasn't really acknowledging it. I was just kind of like doing whatever I could do to get rid of the feeling temporarily. And this was like a pattern for a really long time. So with the awakening, it was kind of like God or source energy or whatever was telling me, hey, you have some things you need to work on. You got some problems. You're like not even in the right school. Like you're not like doing it. You're not doing any of this right. So it's kind of like I would see these unhealed aspects of myself in my dreams. And some of these dreams were hellish. Some of them were dark. Some of them were really scary. But that there was a period of time where I was purging that out of my system. And so now, years later, I don't have periods of time where I have like horrible, scary, like out of this world kind of dreams the way that I was during this one slight period of time. I'll have a bad dream every now and then, but that's normal. And so basically, wait, what was the question?
No, I was just wanting to get your opinion on religion versus
Oh,
spirituality.
right.
Yeah.
That's what I was talking about, hell. Okay. So for me, I think hell is a state of mind. It's not a place. It's like if you have unhealed aspects of yourself, then you will find those unhealed aspects of yourself in realms that are hellish. So for me, it's like, oh, spiritual people have been to hell or whatever. And I'm like, true. I lived a life where I didn't acknowledge my emotions or feelings for a really long time. And I found deep sadness in that was reflected in my subconscious to me so that I could see it and so that I could look at it and be like, this is something I need to deal with and take care of so I could come back here and, operate a little bit better. So for me, it's like that statement is kind of true in a way. Yeah.
Yeah, I used to think on similar grounds, I guess. And then got really interested in studying like saints of like every religion. And I noticed that like I was reading their texts, their commentaries and their like biographies or whatever, and they all kind of came to the same conclusions, but they're using different words to describe that ultimate reality.
Okay.
And so when I think of religion versus spirituality, I always think of like, this is me personally. I think of like religion is like more communal. Like religion is spirituality for those of a community. So you can be in a Christian community and there's thousands of Christian denominations within Christianity, or like the outward expression of spirituality in a group, versus spirituality is very unique to the individual, like saying earlier, like your personal connection with God, however you want to, word you want to use.
Right.
And so like, I don't know. I used to think that they had to be like conjoined. You couldn't have one without the other. But now I don't really think that's true. I think you can be a very individual person, not have a community. But I do think most people would benefit from that because you are communal beings who like groups, right?
That's a fair point, yeah.
But I don't think your group doesn't have to be like a dogmatic group. Your religion group can be whoever, your friends or whatever. Mm-hmm. So that's just my personal idea, I guess.
Yeah, community is important. I agree.
And the last question I have, usually I ask the person I'm talking with. So the podcast is called Finding Ananda, and Ananda is a Sanskrit word that means happiness or bliss. So for the listener, what were your 3 tips you would have for them to find their own Ananda or happiness? It could pertain to the topic we covered today, or it could just be in general.
Notice when you feel joy, like the emotion of joy. Notice it and like follow it and just do whatever you can to every time the feeling of joy comes up. Like that could be in the smallest thing. You could be looking at a blade of grass and you're like suddenly like so enthralled or like so excited or so interested, and you have this feeling of wonder. So noticing when your body is feeling natural joy, and that's like not going to be influenced by something outside of yourself. It's just a point in time where you feel that emotion. So notice it and try to create that feeling. 2, I would say, don't think yourself so much that don't think so much that you are not able to live. And 3, what should the third one be? Be happy for what you have. And like we live in the social media age, and I haven't been on Instagram for a while, so I don't know if Instagram's changed or something. I heard that they like took the amount of likes that are available.
Oh, really? Wow.
Actually, no, I think they were like not showing likes for a certain amount of time, but I think they brought it back, so that's irrelevant. But try not to compare your life to other people's is my point, because you are on your own distinct path, and whatever it is that you want to come to fruition will, but you have to listen to yourself. And let people support you. I guess that's kind of 4 things, but yeah. Find joy, notice when it happens. And then the second one, don't think yourself so much to the point where you don't live. And then the third one is don't compare yourself to other people's situations.
That was really good. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
that was episode number 3. Thanks again to Mishika for having this conversation with me. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And thanks again for tuning in, checking in, listening in to today's podcast. And until next time, take care.